Welcome to Run It Back, a show where we recap the week in UConn men's basketball. It was a big week for the Huskies as they got a huge win at home over Oklahoma State and now see themselves ranked as a consensus top 5 team in the country.
They're number 5 in the AP poll, number 2 in the net rankings that just came out this Monday, and number 4 in KenPom.
After starting the season with some questions around them, it seems like the Huskies are very real and finally getting some respect from the voters and the metrics alike. We mentioned the Oklahoma State game before. The Huskies won by a score of 74-64, a double-digit victory, but still the shortest margin of victory for the Huskies this season. Oklahoma State put up a pretty solid fight late in the second half there. The Huskies really opened it up in the first, but then the Cowboys were able to fight back. Jordan, what did you see from this game that kind of gives you some confidence moving forward that we are really as good as the numbers and the rankings say we are?
Yeah, well, you can't beat everyone by 15 plus. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. But this team found a way to win when they didn't play their best, and I think that's huge for them. They shot pretty poorly from 3. They looked a little sloppy at times with the ball, but they found a way to pull it out, still by double digits too, against a really good team.
Yeah, a lot of people had their struggles. Early in the season, it was, the transfers look great. The freshmen look great. This game against Oklahoma State really showed that, hey, UConn still has some veteran players in Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson, and Adama Sanogo, and they're a great core of leaders. They showed that. They dropped 57 combined points. Only 17 points came from non-players from last year's team. They were able to really step up when the newer guys were struggling. Hawkins made 5 of the team's 8 threes. That group was really just on fire, and the defense really turned it up. Obviously, we talked about on last week's show, Moussa Cisse. He's on the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar watch list. He was a force in the paint. 0 points. We completely shut him down, fouled him out. It was insane defense. The Huskies were able to create offense inside against a very stout D, and honestly, there were some struggles down the stretch, but in reality, UConn cruised to victory here. There was no tension in the second half. They never really got below like 70% win probability. They kind of took their foot off the gas as opposed to having another team pass them by.
Cisse picked up 2 quick fouls really early into this game and didn't do much else for the rest of the game. Would have been interesting to see had he played. However, UConn has another big man on the horizon against Florida this week.
That's right. The Huskies are heading down to the Swamp to face off against the Gators in their first true road game of the season. They played Oregon in Portland, but let's be real, there were not many people at that game. So this is going to be the first true hostile environment that UConn goes to. As a top 5 team, the environment is probably going to be pretty crazy down there. And like Jordan just said, Colin Castleton, he is one of the best big men in the country. He's 7 feet tall. He's on the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar watch list. That's a recurring theme we've talked about on this show. Obviously, we had Moussa Cisse last week. Adama Sanogo's on that list. And now we face off with another guy from the list, Colin Castleton. He averages 16 a game, 7.5 rebounds. But what he really brings to the floor, like any 7-footer should, is interior defense. He averages 3 blocks per game. We've seen Sanogo be able to handle guys like Walker Kessler or Oshun Oshuniye inside. But we did see Moussa Cisse and the overall size of the Cowboys on Thursday kind of give young Donovan Clingan some fits. He probably played his worst game as a Husky on Thursday, and Clingan has been a very big piece for the Huskies when Adama isn't necessarily firing on all cylinders. We've seen him have some struggles against big defenders. It will be very interesting to see how the Huskies front court lines up against Castleton. And even when Castleton's off the floor, it doesn't get much easier. His backup maybe isn't as skilled as he is, but it's still a body that is 6'11" and 300 pounds. So there's going to be some tough defense inside for the Huskies. A very familiar face for the Huskies. Obviously, you have the Shabazz Napier buzzer beater, you have the Final Four game in Dallas, and then you have a few years ago one of the key wins of the Hurley era when the Huskies were able to take down the Gators at Gampel Pavilion. No real guys with experience playing against UConn on this team when they were at Florida, but their point guard Kyle Lofton did transfer in from St. Bonaventure last year. Remember, the Huskies smoked his team that game. He is going through some injury issues right now. He's missed the last 2 games with back spasms. He's the guy who really makes it run for them. He's a distributive point guard. He's like their quarterback, the floor general, all those cliche things. He sets guys up to score. It will be very interesting to see if he goes for this game. He's probably going to give it a little bit more of an effort than he did in games against North Florida and Stetson in terms of trying to get back on the floor, but it will be a very, very big key to the game whether he plays or not.
And if he doesn't go, it's pretty simple who the Huskies need to lock in on for the backcourt. Will Richard, 14 points per game, one of the best shooters, one of the most efficient shooters in the country. They'll need to lock him up as the Huskies try not to get assaulted by a barrage of threes that the Florida team shoots very well.
Yeah, they're a top 60 three-point shooting team in the country this year, and Will Richard is shooting well over 60% from deep. It's a jarring number. Hopefully we see a little bit of regression and the Huskies are able to defend the deep ball better, but this team is really well built. Obviously, you have Castleton inside, as we've seen with Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan. A big man that's a force in the paint can really open up shooting lanes for your team. Florida doesn't defend the three well. Like we said before, Oklahoma State kind of took that away from the Huskies last game. If UConn can heat back up, it should be a game that is very, very tight and one that hopefully we can see the Huskies pull away in the end.
And this will be a game where they will need to heat up from behind the arc. Oklahoma State, definitely not as good as a shooting team as Florida is. And if Florida makes too many threes with UConn not catching up, this game could get away from them quickly.
Yep, and then we talked about foul trouble that UConn caused last week against Oklahoma State. This Florida team is very, very deep. Much like UConn, they might not have the same level of talent as the Huskies, but this is a team that has 10 guys who are averaging 10 minutes a game. This isn't going to be like, oh, that's Musa Cisse, he's their best player, go right at him, draw 2 fouls in the first 4 minutes and take him out for the half. That's not a strategy you can use here because they have guys who will step up and be very efficient in their roles and will keep the game close no matter whether it's their best player on the floor or their number 10 guy. They will be able to fight through any adversity UConn might give them.
Florida slipped up a little bit this season to start, but this is a true hard away game that the team's going to need to really mesh together well to complete.
Especially when you've been playing primarily cupcake games at home or neutral site games. It's always very tough to go on the road that first game. It's nice to get it out of the way before conference play, but Florida is a very game program. As much as it is a football state, their fans will go crazy for basketball down there, especially with a team carrying a top 5 ranking. That's going to be all for Run It Back this week. I'm Ben Jansen. This is Jordan Rosenthal. We'll see you next week to recap the Florida game and the LIU game before we get into Big East basketball play.